Service
Walk
entrance
now.
is around the
You
back,
need
honey.
to leave
The
now.
words cut
This is
through the December
unacceptable.
wind like shards of ice, Madison Torres.
You think you belong
26
here?
doesn't even glance up
You're
from her
nothing but
iPhone as she
trouble.
blocks the air stares of a gleaming
Not
Bombardier
boarding this
Global
flight until we address the
7500.
safety concerns.
Her manicured
We've seen
finger
the
points
reports,
dismissively
and I'm not
toward the
taking any
service area,
risks.
the same
We're on
gesture she
schedule.
might use to shoo away
Make
a
sure
stray
everything
cat.
is ready on your end.
Standing at the bottom of those stairs is Dr. Naomi Brooks, 42, looking absolutely nothing like the owner of a $75 million private jet. Her faded Howard University sweatshirt hangs loose over black yoga pants. Her natural hair is pulled back in a messy bun secured with what appears to be a hospital scrunchie. Scuffed white sneakers complete the look of someone who just rolled out of bed after a 3-day medical marathon. Which is exactly what happened. In exactly 14 minutes, Madison Torres would become the most unemployed person in private aviation history. In 14 minutes, her perfectly curated Instagram life would crumble faster than her fake sympathy smile. But right now, she sees only what her prejudiced eyes want to see. A black woman in casual clothes, obviously not their client. Before we dive deeper into this story that shook the private aviation world, tell me something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you've ever been judged by your appearance, if you've ever been dismissed because of how you looked, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because what happens next will remind you that dignity always wins in the end. Now, let's rewind 48 hours to understand exactly who Madison Torres just made the biggest mistake of her life insulting. Dr. Naomi Brooks had been awake for 48 consecutive hours. Not by choice. Not because she was binge-watching Netflix or partying. She had been elbow-deep in the most complex neurosurgery of her career, reconstructing the shattered brainstem of Senator Patricia Williams's 19-year-old daughter, Emma, who had been thrown from a horse during a college equestrian competition. The surgery required microscopic precision. One wrong move, one tremor, one moment of lost focus, and Emma Williams would never walk again, never speak again, never be anything more than a breathing body in a hospital bed. But Naomi didn't just save Emma's life. She gave her back her future. As the chief neurosurgeon at Mount Sinai and founder of NeuroCure Inc., Dr. Brooks had revolutionized treatment for traumatic brain injuries. Her pharmaceutical patents had generated $2.8 billion in revenue over the past 5 years, money that allowed her to own this Bombardier Global 7500 tail number N847NB, purchased 8 months ago as a reward for her latest breakthrough in neural regeneration therapy. The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman who could rebuild broken minds was being judged as mentally deficient by someone who probably couldn't spell neurosurgery. Naomi usually flew with her regular crew, Captain Williams, and his team professionals, who knew her habits, her preferences, her schedule. But they were on mandatory rest after a transatlantic flight to London, where Naomi had consulted on a diplomatic immunity case. This replacement crew came from Platinum Air Services, highly rated, supposedly vetted, supposedly professional. Madison Torres represented everything wrong with that assumption. At 26, Madison had been working private aviation for exactly 3 years. She looked like she'd stepped off the cover of a flight attendant recruitment brochure, all sharp angles and perfect teeth, with the kind of manufactured beauty that photographed well for her Instagram account, where she had carefully cultivated 47,000 followers who believed she lived a glamorous jet-set lifestyle. What they didn't know was that Madison spent most of her time cleaning up after wealthy passengers and taking covert photos of celebrity clients to sell to tabloids. She had a particular talent for making passengers feel small while maintaining plausible deniability, always just professional enough to avoid formal complaints, always just rude enough to establish dominance. She also had a not-so-secret habit of filming crazy passenger encounters for TikTok, though she was careful never to show faces or identifying details. Her followers ate up stories about entitled customers and bizarre requests. Madison had no idea she was about to become the star of someone else's viral video. The winter wind at Teterboro Airport was particularly vicious that Friday afternoon, cutting across the tarmac with the kind of cold that made your bones ache. Despite the temperature, the private aviation terminal buzzed with holiday travelers. December was peak season for the wealthy and famous, everyone jetting off to Aspen St. Moritz or private islands in the Caribbean. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the FBO lounge, several passengers waited for their own flights. Patricia Williams, 58. A real estate mogul worth approximately $400 million, sipped champagne while reviewing contracts on her tablet. David Kim, 45, tech executive and early investor in 3 unicorn startups, scrolled through his LinkedIn feed while his assistant coordinated his family's trip to Japan. Maria Santos, 35, lifestyle influencer with 300,000 followers across platforms, live-streamed her pre-flight routine to fans who worshipped her carefully crafted aesthetic. James Parker, 29, sports agent representing half the NBA's rising stars, worked his phone constantly negotiating contracts that would make headline news. All of them had clear views of the tarmac. All of them were about to witness something that would change their perspective on justice forever. Carlos Mendez, 23, worked airport maintenance and ground services. Originally from El Salvador, he'd been at Teterboro for 2 years, saving every penny to bring his younger sister to America for college. Carlos spoke 3 languages fluently and had an associate's degree in aviation management, but most people saw only his maintenance uniform and assumed he was just another invisible worker. Carlos noticed everything. It was his job to notice. And right now he noticed tension building around the Bombardier Global 7500. He pulled his phone from his pocket, not to film, not yet, just to be ready. Something felt wrong. As Dr. Naomi Brooks approached the air stairs of her own aircraft, she carried only 2 items, a worn leather medical bag that had belonged to her mentor, Dr. Sarah Jackson, and a small overnight case containing exactly 3 changes of clothes. She wasn't traveling to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She just wanted to get to her cabin in the mountains outside Aspen, pour a glass of wine, and sleep for approximately 14 hours straight. Madison Torres saw none of this context. She saw what her prejudice told her to see. A black woman in casual clothes approaching a multi-million-dollar aircraft. The math didn't compute in her narrow worldview. "Excuse me," Naomi said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I'm here for the 4 p.m. departure." Madison finally looked up from her phone, scanning Naomi from head to toe with undisguised disdain. "Ma'am, this aircraft is chartered by Dr. Naomi Brooks. This is a private flight. I am Dr. Brooks." Madison actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle or an embarrassed giggle, but a sharp cutting sound that carried across the tarmac like a slap. "Right. And I'm Oprah Winfrey." The comparison was deliberate, calculated. Madison knew exactly what she was doing, reducing an accomplished neurosurgeon to a racial stereotype, dismissing her intelligence and achievements with casual cruelty. Naomi felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, not yet, but recognition. She'd been here before. Not on this tarmac, not with this plane, but in this moment. The moment when someone looked at her skin color and decided she couldn't possibly belong. She thought about Emma Williams, the senator's daughter, lying unconscious in the ICU just hours ago. Emma's parents hadn't cared what Naomi looked like when their daughter's life hung in the balance. They'd cared about her skill, her reputation, her ability to perform miracles with a scalpel, but apparently owning the plane she'd earned through those miracles was beyond belief. "Check your manifest," Naomi said calmly. Madison waved her hand dismissively. "I don't need to check anything. Dr. Brooks is a distinguished gentleman, not—" She gestured vaguely at Naomi's appearance, whatever this is. That's when Naomi knew Madison Torres had never actually read the passenger information, had never bothered to research who she was serving, had made assumptions based on a name and her own limited imagination. The wind picked up again, whipping Naomi's sweatshirt hood around her face. She pushed it back, revealing the surgical mask tan lines that marked her as someone who spent serious time in operating rooms. Madison didn't notice. She was too busy texting someone, probably Tyler Morgan, the co-pilot she'd been dating for 6 months. Inside the cockpit, Captain Robert Kane, 52, watched the interaction through the windscreen. Kane was old-school aviation, the kind of pilot who believed the industry had been ruined by political correctness and diversity initiatives. In his mind, private aviation was about serving the right kind of people, people who looked like him, people who belonged. Seeing a black woman in casual clothes arguing with his flight attendant triggered every prejudice Kane had carefully maintained throughout his career. He reached for the intercom. "Madison, everything okay down there?" His voice carried clearly across the tarmac, loud enough for Naomi to hear, loud enough for Carlos Mendez to look up from the luggage cart he was loading 50 yards away. "Just a misunderstanding," Captain Madison replied sweetly, putting on her professional voice for show. "This lady seems confused about which aircraft she's supposed to be on." Naomi stood perfectly still. She'd learned long ago that movement could be interpreted as aggression, that defending herself could be twisted into attack. Better to let them reveal themselves completely before responding. Ma'am Madison continued, her voice dripping with fake concern. "The charter terminal is back that way. Maybe you're looking for a different flight. Commercial departures are in the main terminal." The insult landed exactly as intended. Madison was suggesting Naomi couldn't afford private aviation, that she must be lost. Confused, possibly looking for a discounted commercial flight. Carlos Mendez heard every word. His jaw tightened. He'd seen this before, watched wealthy passengers treat service workers like garbage, watched service workers treat anyone who didn't look right even worse. But this felt different. This felt wrong in a way that made his stomach twist. He pulled out his phone and opened TikTok. Not to go live, not yet, but to be ready. His followers knew him as Carlos Truth Tells, and he'd built a modest following documenting the absurdities of working around the ultra-wealthy. His audience appreciated his bilingual commentary and his willingness to call out bad behavior when he saw it. Inside the FBO lounge, Patricia Williams glanced up from her tablet. Even through the soundproof glass, she could read body language. The woman at the aircraft stairs looked familiar, but Patricia couldn't place her. The flight attendant's posture screamed aggression and superiority. Patricia had been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment early in her career before she'd earned enough money to demand respect. She pulled out her phone and started recording through the window, just in case. Dr. Naomi Brooks looked at Madison Torres and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of getting angry, instead of demanding to speak to supervisors or threatening lawsuits, she decided to let the situation play out completely. Let Madison dig the hole as deep as she wanted. Let the crew reveal exactly who they were before revealing who she was. "I understand your concern about security," Naomi said, her voice measured and professional. "Perhaps you could check the passenger manifest or ask for my identification." Madison rolled her eyes dramatically. "Ma'am, I don't have time for games. The actual passenger will be arriving soon, and I need to prepare the cabin. You need to move along before security has to get involved." "Security?" The word hung in the air like a threat. Madison was escalating, putting Naomi in the position where any further insistence could be framed as trespassing, as causing a disturbance, as being difficult. It was a trap Naomi had seen before. A trap designed to make the victim choose between dignity and safety, between standing up for themselves and avoiding confrontation. Most people chose safety. Most people walked away. Dr. Naomi Brooks was not most people. She had rebuilt brains. She had saved lives. She had built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing. She owned the aircraft Madison was standing on, and she was about to remind everyone exactly who they were dealing with. "I think," Naomi said quietly, "you're about to make a very expensive mistake." The wind shifted, carrying Naomi's words across the tarmac with crystalline clarity. Madison Torres heard the tone change, felt something in the atmosphere shift, but her ego was too inflated to recognize danger. "Expensive mistake." Madison laughed again, this time attracting the attention of ground crew working nearby. "Honey, the only mistake here is you thinking you can intimidate me. I've dealt with plenty of people trying to scam their way onto private jets." Scam. The word hit Naomi like a physical blow, not because it hurt her feelings, but because it revealed the depth of Madison's assumptions. In Madison's worldview, a black woman claiming to own a $75 million aircraft could only be running a con. Captain Robert Kane climbed down from the cockpit, his weathered face set in lines of practiced authority. At 52, Kane had been flying for nearly 3 decades, starting with regional airlines before transitioning to corporate aviation. He'd cultivated an image of old-school professionalism, but underneath the polished exterior lay a bitter resentment toward what he saw as the industry's changing demographics. "What seems to be the problem here?" Kane's voice carried the weight of assumed authority. He looked at Naomi the way a parent might look at a child caught misbehaving. "Captain Kane, this woman is claiming to be Dr. Brooks Madison," explained her voice, taking on the tone of someone reporting a crime. "She's refusing to leave the aircraft stairs." Kane studied Naomi with undisguised skepticism. "Ma'am, Dr. Brooks is a very important client, a distinguished physician and business person. You clearly don't fit that profile." The casual racism was breathtaking in its simplicity. Kane wasn't shouting slurs or burning crosses. He was simply stating, as if it were scientific fact, that Naomi couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be because of how she looked. "What exactly is the profile for a distinguished physician?" Naomi asked, her voice still calm but carrying a subtle edge that made Carlos Mendez look up from his workstation 50 yards away. Kane waved his hand dismissively. "Professional attire, appropriate bearing, documentation. You look like you just rolled out of bed." "I look like someone who just saved a life," Naomi replied. "But please continue explaining to me what successful people are supposed to look like." The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Madison sensed at first the subtle shift that suggested this woman wasn't going to simply walk away. Instead of backing down, Madison doubled down. "Look, sister," Madison said, putting emphasis on the word sister in a way that made it sound like an insult. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Captain Kane. Should I call security, sister?" The word landed like a slap across several faces. Carlos Mendez's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Inside the FBO lounge, Patricia Williams set down her champagne glass harder than necessary. Even some of the ground crew stopped what they were doing, but it was Tyler Morgan's reaction that sealed everyone's fate. Tyler Morgan, 28, emerged from the aircraft like he was walking onto a movie set. Tall blonde with the kind of casual confidence that came from never being questioned, never being doubted, never having to prove he belonged anywhere. As Madison's boyfriend of 6 months, he'd learned to mirror her casual cruelty to back up her judgments without question. "Babe, what's the situation?" Tyler asked, slipping an arm around Madison's waist in a gesture that was both possessive and dismissive. He looked at Naomi like she was an interesting problem to solve rather than a human being. "This woman is trying to board our aircraft," Madison explained, leaning into Tyler's embrace, "claiming to be Dr. Brooks." Tyler laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Dr. Brooks? The neurosurgeon?" "Right." He looked Naomi up and down with theatrical disbelief. "Dr. Brooks owns half of Manhattan. Dr. Brooks wears Armani, not..." He gestured at her sweatshirt, whatever that is. "Howard University," Naomi said quietly. "What, my sweatshirt?" "It's from Howard University. where I completed my undergraduate degree before attending Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, but please continue telling me about my wardrobe choices." Something in her tone made Tyler pause, not because he recognized authority, but because he sensed resistance. In his experience, people who looked like Naomi didn't push back when confronted by people who looked like him. That's when Jessica Rivera arrived. Jessica Rivera, 34, ground operations supervisor, had been watching the confrontation from her office window. She'd seen enough situations to know when crew members needed backup, and Madison Torres had been calling for support. Jessica had worked her way up from ground crew to supervisor over 8 years, and she protected her people fiercely. What she didn't protect was fairness. "What's going on here?" Jessica demanded, striding across the tarmac with clipboard in hand and authority in every step. She wore the kind of uniform that demanded respect, crisp and official, with enough badges and insignia to intimidate anyone not familiar with aviation hierarchy. "Thank God you're here, Jess," Madison said, relief evident in her voice. "This woman is trying to board Dr. Brooks's aircraft. She won't leave when asked." Jessica looked at Naomi with the practiced assessment of someone who spent her days managing problems. "Ma'am, you're on private property. If you don't have authorization to be here, I need you to return to the terminal immediately." "I do have authorization," Naomi replied. "I own this aircraft." Jessica actually rolled her eyes. "Ma'am, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "Doctor, Naomi Brooks is one of our most valued clients, a prominent neurosurgeon and pharmaceutical executive. You're clearly not Dr. Brooks." Clearly. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Jessica hadn't asked for identification, hadn't checked any documentation, hadn't made any effort to verify Naomi's claim. She'd simply looked at a black woman in casual clothes and decided the claim was impossible. Carlos Mendez had heard enough. He pulled out his phone, opened TikTok, and went live. "¿Qué tal, mi gente?" he said quietly, speaking Spanish first, as always. "Tenemos una situación aquí en Teterboro." His viewer count jumped from 0 to 12 immediately. Carlos had a modest but engaged following, people who appreciated his honest takes on the aviation industry and his willingness to call out injustice when he saw it. "Okay, English time," Carlos continued, switching languages seamlessly. "Y'all, I'm watching something right now that's got me heated. We got a black woman trying to board what looks like her own private jet, and the crew is treating her like she's homeless." 15 viewers became 30. Comments started flowing. They asking her to leave, talking about calling security, and this woman is calm as can be. Something ain't right about this. Back at the aircraft, the confrontation was escalating beyond anyone's control. Madison felt emboldened by the support from Kane Tyler and Jessica. In her mind, she wasn't being racist. She was being professional, maintaining security, protecting valuable clients from scammers and trespassers. "Ma'am," Jessica said, her voice taking on the tone of someone running out of patience, "I'm going to ask you one more time to leave voluntarily. If you refuse, I'll have to call airport police." "For what crime?" Naomi asked. "Trespassing, impersonating a client, creating a disturbance." The charges were vague but threatening. Jessica was building a legal case in real time, creating justification for whatever force might be necessary to remove Naomi from the area. Inside the FBO lounge, the scene was attracting more attention. David Kim had noticed the confrontation and started recording on his phone. Maria Santos, always alert for content opportunities, had opened Instagram Live and was narrating the situation to her followers. "This is insane," Maria whispered to her phone. "They've got this woman surrounded like she's dangerous or something. She's literally just standing there." Her viewer count climbed rapidly. Maria's followers knew her for luxury travel content, but this was different. This was real drama happening in real time. James Parker looked up from his constant phone calls and business negotiations. Something about the woman's posture, her calm in the face of escalating aggression, reminded him of his athlete clients facing hostile crowds. She had that same centered energy, that same refusal to be intimidated. He started recording too. Ma'am Kane said, his voice getting harder. "You have 30 seconds to leave this area, or we're calling federal authorities. Threatening aircraft operations is a federal crime." Threatening aircraft operations. Kane was escalating the legal stakes, invoking post-9/11 security language that could result in terrorism charges. It was a nuclear option designed to terrify Naomi into compliance. Instead, it backfired spectacularly. "Captain Kane." Naomi said, her voice finally carrying an edge of steel. "I strongly suggest you verify passenger information before making threats about federal crimes." "I don't need to verify anything," Kane shot back. "I can see what I'm looking at." There it was, the admission. Kane wasn't basing his judgment on documentation, security protocols, or professional procedures. He was basing it entirely on what he saw when he looked at Naomi's skin color and clothing. Carlos Mendez heard it through his phone's microphone and nearly dropped the device. "Did y'all hear that?" he whispered to his live stream. "This captain just admitted he's judging her based on how she looks. 67 people watching now." The viewer count kept climbing. People were sharing Carlos's stream-tagging friends, spreading the video across platforms. Teterboro Airport started appearing in comments. Tyler Morgan decided to escalate further. "You know what I'm calling airport security right now? This is harassment." He pulled out his phone and dialed, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Yeah, we need security at the Bombardier Global on Tango 7. We have an uncooperative individual refusing to leave the area. Possible mental health issue." Mental health issue. Tyler was laying groundwork to dismiss anything Naomi might say as the ravings of someone psychologically unstable. It was character assassination in real time. Madison smiled. In her mind, they were winning. 4 aviation professionals against 1 confused woman. The math seemed simple. She had no idea that Carlos Mendez's live stream had just hit 200 viewers and was climbing rapidly. She had no idea that inside the FBO lounge, Patricia Williams was texting contacts at 3 major news networks. She had no idea that Maria Santos's Instagram Live had been picked up by several aviation news accounts. Most importantly, she had no idea who she was actually talking to. Airport security arrived in the form of Officer David Martinez, 45, a former police officer who'd transitioned to private security after a back injury ended his patrol career. Martinez prided himself on de-escalating situations, but he also tended to trust aviation professionals over random civilians. "What's the situation here?" Martinez asked, his hand resting casually on his radio. "This woman is refusing to leave the aircraft area," Jessica explained quickly. "We've asked multiple times, but she's claiming to own the plane." Martinez looked at Naomi with the practiced assessment of someone who dealt with thousands of disputed situations. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing you're authorized to be here?" It was the first reasonable question anyone had asked. Naomi reached into her medical bag and pulled out her wallet, removing a black American Express Centurion card and her driver's license. "Dr. Naomi Brooks," she said, handing both items to Martinez. "That's my aircraft." Martinez examined the cards carefully. The Centurion card was real. He'd seen enough fake ones to know the difference. The driver's license matched the name on the card. But he wasn't an aviation expert, and the crew seemed so certain. "Ma'am, these show your name, but they don't prove you own this specific aircraft," Martinez said diplomatically. "Check the registration," Naomi suggested. "Tail number N847NB, registered to NeuroCure Inc., which I own." Martinez looked at Kane, Tyler, Madison, and Jessica. 4 aviation professionals all insisting this woman was wrong. Then he looked at Naomi, calm and specific in her details. "Captain, can you check the aircraft registration?" Martinez asked. Kane's jaw tightened. "Officer, I don't need to check anything. I know who our client is, and this isn't her. Just humor me, Martinez pressed. Check the paperwork. That's when everything started to fall apart. Kane realized he'd never actually read the detailed passenger manifest. He'd been told Dr. N. Brooks assumed it was a man never bothered to verify. Tyler had made the same assumption. Madison had relied on Kane's judgment. Jessica had trusted her crew. None of them had done their actual job. The paperwork is in the cockpit, Kane said weakly. Go get it, Martinez said. It wasn't a request. As Kane reluctantly climbed back into the aircraft, Carlos Mendez's live stream hit 500 viewers. Comments were flooding in from around the world. This is about to get good, Carlos whispered to his phone. He had no idea how right he was. Captain Robert Kane disappeared into the cockpit with the urgency of a man who'd suddenly realized he might be about to lose his career. Through the aircraft windows, observers could see him frantically searching through paperwork, his movements becoming increasingly desperate as seconds ticked by. Carlos Mendez adjusted his phone angle to capture more of the scene while maintaining his live commentary. Okay, mi gente. The captain just went to check paperwork that he should have checked before refusing this woman boarding. Y'all, this is looking bad for the crew. His viewer count had jumped to 847 and climbing. The algorithm was picking up engagement, pushing his stream to more feeds. Comments flooded in faster than he could read them. Donde esto pasando came from Spanish-speaking viewers. This is discrimination, plain and simple, typed Justice Watcher 47. That woman is too calm, she knows something they don't, observed aviation expert. Inside the FBO lounge, Patricia Williams had seen enough. As a successful businesswoman, she'd faced her share of discrimination throughout her career. The scene unfolding on the tarmac triggered every memory of being underestimated, dismissed, or denied access because of her gender. Watching a black woman face the same treatment, but worse, struck a nerve. She opened her phone's camera app and began recording her business instincts, telling her this moment needed to be preserved. David Kim, the tech executive, recognized the viral potential immediately. He'd built his fortune partly by identifying trending moments before they exploded. This had all the elements: clear injustice, compelling characters, real-time drama, and social media amplification. He posted to LinkedIn, watching what appears to be racial discrimination unfold in real time at Teterboro Airport. Aviation crew denying boarding to a black woman who claims to own the 75 millimeter jet. Will update with video. The post went live to his 45,000 professional connections. Maria Santos had the biggest social media following in the lounge, and her Instagram Live was already viral within the aviation and travel influencer communities. Her followers knew her for luxury content, but they'd never seen her this animated about social justice. This is not okay, she told her camera, her voice carrying clearly through the lounge. I don't care what anyone looks like if they say they own the plane, you check the documentation. You don't just dismiss them. Her comments section exploded with fire emojis and demands for justice. Back on the tarmac, Officer Martinez was growing impatient. Captain Kane, how long does it take to find paperwork? Kane's voice came from inside the cockpit, muffled and strained. Just give me another minute, officer. Jessica Rivera sensed the momentum shifting and decided to take control. Officer Martinez, regardless of paperwork, this woman has been disruptive and uncooperative. She's interfering with flight operations. It was a desperate move trying to criminalize Naomi's presence regardless of whether she owned the aircraft. Tyler Morgan nodded enthusiastically. She's been argumentative from the start, refusing direct instructions from flight crew. Madison Torres, feeling the ground shifting beneath her feet, played her trump card. Plus, she doesn't look like she could afford this kind of aircraft. I mean, come on. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Madison had finally said explicitly what everyone had been thinking implicitly. She'd reduced the entire situation to its racist core. A black woman couldn't possibly be wealthy enough to own a private jet. Carlos Mendez nearly dropped his phone. Did she just... Did she really just say that on camera? Ay Dios mío, these people just buried themselves? His live stream exploded. 200 viewers became 2,000 in 30 seconds. The chat moved so fast it was impossible to read individual comments, just a blur of outrage and disbelief. Dr. Naomi Brooks heard Madison's statement with crystalline clarity. She'd been waiting for this moment, the moment when polite racism dropped its mask and revealed its true face. She'd learned long ago that patience often forced people to expose themselves completely. Officer Martinez Naomi said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. "I'd like that statement included in your incident report." Martinez looked uncomfortable. He'd been trying to de-escalate the situation, but Madison's comment had made it explicitly about race and class in a way that couldn't be ignored. "Ma'am, let's just wait for the captain to return with the paperwork," Martinez said diplomatically. James Parker had stopped pretending to work on his phone. As a sports agent, he'd negotiated with some of the most powerful people in entertainment and athletics. He recognized power when he saw it, and something about Naomi Brooks's composure suggested she was holding cards no one else could see. He started recording on his phone, adding his perspective to the growing documentation of the incident. That's when Captain Kane finally emerged from the cockpit, his face pale and his hands empty. Officer Martinez Kane said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to make a phone call." "Did you find the paperwork?" Martinez asked. Kane's silence was deafening. Madison, Tyler, and Jessica exchanged glances, suddenly realizing their captain wasn't backing them up with documentation. Captain Madison prompted her confidence wavering for the first time. Kane looked at each of his crew members, then at Dr. Naomi Brooks, who stood watching with the patience of someone who'd already won. "The aircraft," Kane said slowly, "is registered to NeuroCure Inc." The admission hit like a physical blow. Tyler actually stepped backward. Madison's mouth fell open. Jessica's clipboard slipped from her fingers. Carlos Mendez captured every reaction. "No manches. Did y'all just hear that the plane is registered to her company? These people just discriminated against the actual owner." His viewer count hit 3,000. Comments exploded in multiple languages. Justice for Brooks started trending on TikTok. Officer Martinez looked from the crew to Dr. Brooks. "Ma'am, can you provide additional identification proving your connection to NeuroCure Inc.?" Naomi reached into her medical bag again, this time pulling out a leather portfolio. Inside were business cards identifying her as CEO and founder of NeuroCure Inc., along with a letter of authorization for aircraft use. Martinez examined the documents carefully. Everything matched. Everything was legitimate. "Ma'am," he said formally, "I apologize for the confusion. You're clearly authorized to be here." The apology landed like a judge's gavel. Madison Torres felt her world tilt sideways. Tyler Morgan started calculating how quickly he could distance himself from the situation. Jessica Rivera was already thinking about damage control. Captain Kane was thinking about his pension, but the viral momentum was just beginning. Patricia Williams had been recording for 10 minutes, capturing every racist assumption, every dismissive gesture, every moment of realization. Her real estate empire had given her connections throughout New York media, and she was already texting her contacts. David Kim's LinkedIn post had been shared 200 times in 15 minutes. His professional network was spreading the story throughout the business and tech communities. Maria Santos's Instagram Live had peaked at 12,000 simultaneous viewers. Screenshots and screen recordings were being shared across every platform. Teterboro discrimination was gaining momentum. James Parker had already sent the video to 3 of his NBA clients, knowing they'd amplify it to their millions of followers. But the most damaging documentation was coming from Carlos Mendez, whose live stream had captured every word, every expression, every moment of casual racism from people who thought they were protected by their positions. "Y'all, this is why we need to record everything," Carlos told his audience, now over 4,000 strong. These people thought they could treat this woman however they wanted because of how she looked. But she owns the plane. She owns the whole aircraft. In the comments, viewers were already identifying the crew members, finding their social media profiles, cross-referencing with aviation databases. The internet had weaponized its investigative power. Madison Torres's Instagram account, Madison Flies High, was being flooded with comments. Her carefully curated photos of luxury travel and jet-set lifestyle now seemed like mockeries in light of her actual behavior. Tyler Morgan's LinkedIn profile was being screenshot and shared. His professional reputation was crumbling in real time. Captain Kane's aviation credentials were being researched by pilots around the world, his years of experience suddenly meaningless in the face of documented discrimination. Jessica Rivera's supervisory position at Teterboro was being questioned by aviation forums and industry groups. But they had no idea how much worse it was about to get, because Dr. Naomi Brooks hadn't made her phone call yet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her iPhone, scrolling through contacts with the deliberate pace of someone who'd already decided exactly what needed to happen next. "Officer Martinez," she said politely, "would it be possible to have some privacy for this call?" Martinez nodded, gesturing for the crew to step back. "Everyone give Dr. Brooks some space." As the crew reluctantly moved away, Carlos Mendez zoomed in with his phone camera, trying to capture audio without being obvious. Dr. Brooks selected a contact and pressed call. The phone rang twice before connecting. "Michael, it's Naomi." Even from a distance, Carlos could tell someone important had answered. Naomi's tone had shifted to pure business authority. "Yes, I'm at the aircraft. No, I'm not on board yet. Your crew is refusing to let me up the stairs." The pause that followed was pregnant with implications. Carlos held his breath, his live stream audience growing more excited by the second. Kane and Torres Naomi continued naming names. Also Tyler Morgan and Jessica Rivera. Another pause. "Put me on speaker." Dr. Naomi Brooks held her phone up high enough for everyone on the tarmac to hear. The next voice that emerged would change everything. "Dr. Brooks, this is Michael Davis, CEO of Platinum Air Services. Where exactly are you right now?" The crew members' faces went white as they recognized their ultimate boss's voice. "I'm standing on the tarmac at Teterboro being refused boarding of my own aircraft by your employees." Michael Davis's voice exploded through the phone speaker with barely controlled panic. "Kane, are you there? Madison Torres. Tyler Morgan, what the hell is going on?" Captain Kane's voice cracked as he tried to respond. "Mr. Davis, there was a misunderstanding about passenger identification." "Misunderstanding?" Davis roared. "That is Dr. Naomi Brooks. She owns NeuroCure Inc. She owns the aircraft you're standing on. She pays your salaries. She's worth $2.8 billion. The silence on the tarmac was deafening. Carlos Mendez had to cover his microphone to keep from shouting in excitement. His viewer count had exploded past 5,000, with comments moving too fast to read. Madison Torres felt her knees go weak. Tyler Morgan looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Jessica Rivera was already backing away from the group, trying to distance herself physically from the disaster. But Dr. Naomi Brooks wasn't finished. "Michael," she said, her voice carrying across the tarmac with perfect clarity, "I want them off my aircraft. All of them. Now." The judgment had been rendered. The silence stretched across the tarmac like a held breath. Michael Davis's voice crackled through the phone speaker with the desperation of a man watching his company's reputation disintegrate in real time. "Dr. Brooks, I am profoundly sorry. There's been a catastrophic misunderstanding. Kane, Torres, Morgan, Rivera, you're all suspended immediately pending full investigation. Dr. Brooks, please let me personally arrange—" "No." Naomi cut him off, her voice carrying the kind of authority that ended discussions rather than started them. "I want them off my aircraft now. I want them escorted from this airport. And I want a new crew here within the hour." Madison Torres finally found her voice, though it came out as a desperate squeak. "Dr. Brooks, I'm so sorry I didn't know. The manifest didn't have a photo. I was just following security protocols. Security protocols. Even in the face of complete exposure, Madison was trying to hide behind procedure as if racist behavior could be excused by calling it professional caution. Security protocols?" Naomi repeated slowly, her voice carrying an edge that made everyone within hearing distance uncomfortable. Would involve checking identification and verifying passenger information. "You did neither. You made assumptions based on my skin color and clothing." Tyler Morgan stepped forward, his desperation making him bold. "Dr. Brooks, this is all a big misunderstanding. We were protecting your aircraft from unauthorized persons. We had no way of knowing—" "You had every way of knowing," Naomi interrupted. "You could have asked for identification. You could have checked the manifest. You could have verified registration. Instead, you decided that a black woman in casual clothes couldn't possibly own a $75 million aircraft." Carlos Mendez was struggling to keep his phone steady while capturing every word. His live stream had peaked at 7,000 concurrent viewers, with clips being shared across every social media platform. Teterboro Gate was trending on TikTok. Private jet discrimination was climbing on Twitter, and aviation forums worldwide were exploding with commentary. "Ay Dios mío, Carlos," whispered to his audience. "She's dismantling them piece by piece. This is better than any telenovela." Captain Kane made one last desperate attempt to salvage his career. "Dr. Brooks, in my 30 years of aviation experience, I've learned to be cautious about security. These days, with fraud and identity theft," Captain Kane Naomi's voice could have cut steel. "In my 30 years of being black in America, I've learned to recognize racism when I see it. This had nothing to do with security and everything to do with prejudice." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Kane actually staggered backward a half step, his face flushing red with anger and humiliation. "Now wait just a minute," Kane said, his voice rising. "I resent the implication that I'm racist. I've served passengers of all backgrounds throughout my career. It was exactly the wrong thing to say." Dr. Naomi Brooks stared at him with the cold precision of a surgeon preparing to make an incision. "Captain Kane, you told me I didn't look like a distinguished physician. You said I clearly didn't fit the profile. You refused to check documentation. You threatened me with federal charges. And when pressed, you admitted you were judging based on what you could see. What exactly did you see that made you so certain I couldn't be Dr. Brooks?" Kane's mouth opened and closed silently. There was no answer that wouldn't damn him completely. Jessica Rivera, sensing the total collapse of any defensible position, decided to go on the attack. "Dr. Brooks, with all due respect, you have to understand our position. Private aviation deals with security threats every day. We have protocols." "Ms. Rivera," Naomi interrupted, "you're the ground operations supervisor. You're responsible for ensuring crew members follow actual protocols, not made-up justifications for discrimination. Did you verify my identity before supporting your crew's refusal?" "We were informed by the crew." "Did you personally verify my identity?" "No. But did you check the aircraft registration?" The crew said, "Yes or no, Miss Rivera." "Did you check the registration?" Jessica's silence was damning. Officer Martinez had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort. As security, he was supposed to maintain order, but it was becoming clear that the real threat to order was the crew's behavior, not the passengers' presence. Dr. Brooks Martinez said diplomatically, "How would you like to proceed?" Before Naomi could answer, another voice joined the conversation from an unexpected direction. "Excuse me," came a crisp British accent from behind the group. I couldn't help but overhear. Everyone turned to see William Thompson, 49 Airport Operations Manager, striding across the tarmac with the confidence of someone who owned the ground they walked on. Thompson had been monitoring the situation from his office, watching through security cameras as it escalated beyond his staff's control. Thompson represented old money authority, the kind of institutional power that rarely questioned itself. He wore his position like armor, convinced that his title made him right regardless of circumstances. "I'm William Thompson, Airport Operations Manager," he announced as if his position should end all discussion. "There seems to be some confusion here about access protocols." Naomi turned to face Thompson with the same calm attention she'd given the crew. "No confusion, Mr. Thompson. Your ground supervisor and this aircraft crew denied me boarding of my own plane based on my appearance." Thompson's smile was condescending, practiced, designed to make difficult people feel small. "Ms. I'm sorry, what did you say your name was? Dr. Naomi Brooks, owner of this aircraft?" Thompson's smile faltered slightly, but his institutional arrogance held firm. "Dr. Brooks, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Our crew members are highly trained professionals. If they had concerns about identification, they never asked for identification." "Well, surely you understand that private aircraft require certain standards of presentation." Standards of presentation. Thompson had walked directly into the same trap that had destroyed the crew. He was suggesting that Naomi's appearance disqualified her from accessing her own property. Carlos Mendez couldn't believe what he was hearing. Y'all, the airport manager, just doubled down on this discrimination. He's talking about standards of presentation to a woman who owns the plane. His live stream was being watched by over 8,000 people now, with viewers sharing clips faster than he could track. Teterboro discrimination had gone global, with aviation professionals from Europe, Asia, and South America weighing in. Inside the FBO lounge, Patricia Williams had seen enough. She was done being a passive observer. She stood up from her chair, gathered her things, and headed for the door. David Kim noticed her movement. "Patricia, where are you going? To handle this myself," Patricia replied grimly. "I've been on the receiving end of this kind of treatment, and I'm not watching it happen to someone else." She pushed through the FBO doors and strode onto the tarmac, her $2,000 Hermes heels clicking authoritatively against the concrete. Maria Santos was still live streaming, but now her followers were demanding action, not just observation. "You need to do something," filled her comments. "Don't just record." Maria looked through the window at the confrontation, then at her phone screen showing thousands of viewers, then back at the tarmac. She made a decision that would change her entire relationship with her audience. She ended her live stream and headed outside. James Parker was dealing with his own moral reckoning. His athlete clients faced discrimination constantly, and he'd built his career fighting for their respect and fair treatment. Watching someone else face the same bias while he sat comfortably in a lounge was making him physically ill. He finished his phone call and followed Maria toward the door. Back on the tarmac, William Thompson was digging his own professional grave with remarkable efficiency. "Dr. Brooks, I'm sure you're a very accomplished person, but you have to understand our position. Private aviation serves a specific clientele with certain expectations." "What expectations?" Naomi asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Professional presentation, appropriate documentation, behavioral standards." "Behavioral standards," Naomi repeated. "You mean standing calmly while being insulted, discriminated against, and threatened with arrest?" Thompson was realizing he'd walked into a buzzsaw, but his institutional pride wouldn't let him back down. "Dr. Brooks, I'm simply trying to explain." "No, Mr. Thompson. You're trying to justify the unjustifiable. You're trying to make discrimination sound like customer service." That's when Patricia Williams arrived. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Patricia Williams. I've been watching this debacle from the FBO lounge, and I need to say something." Thompson turned toward Patricia with visible relief. Here was someone who looked like his idea of a private aviation client, well-dressed, clearly wealthy, definitely white. Ms. Williams, I appreciate your concern, but this is an operational matter. This is a civil rights violation. Patricia cut him off. I've been recording everything from inside the lounge. I have video of your crew refusing boarding to the aircraft owner based solely on her appearance. I have audio of explicitly racist statements, and I have contacts at 3 major news networks who will be very interested in this story. Thompson's face went pale. Patricia Williams wasn't just another passenger. She was a media-connected billionaire with the power to destroy reputations. Madison Torres was hyperventilating. Her carefully constructed Instagram life was crumbling in real time as comments flooded her posts. Her follower count dropped and aviation industry accounts started blocking her. Tyler Morgan was frantically texting someone, probably his father, who worked in corporate aviation and might have connections to help him. Captain Kane was staring at the ground, finally understanding that his 30-year career was over. Jessica Rivera was backing toward the terminal, trying to physically distance herself from the disaster she'd helped create. But Dr. Naomi Brooks wasn't finished with any of them. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice carrying across the tarmac with surgical precision. I want a written incident report documenting everything that happened here. I want the security footage preserved. I want personnel files for everyone involved. And I want assurance that this will never happen to another passenger at your airport. Thompson tried one last desperate deflection. Dr. Brooks, surely we can resolve this privately. No need for formal complaints or media attention. Mr. Thompson, Patricia Williams interrupted. It's too late for private resolution. This is already viral. Carlos over there has been live streaming to thousands of viewers. Social media is exploding. The damage is done. As if summoned by her words, Carlos Mendez looked up from his phone. Exacto. 8,000 people watched this happen live. Y'all can't cover this up. Maria Santos and James Parker had reached the group, adding their voices to the growing chorus of witnesses demanding accountability. I'm Maria Santos. Maria announced 300,000 Instagram followers. I've documented everything that happened here. James Parker. James added, I represent professional athletes who face this kind of discrimination constantly. This needs to be addressed comprehensively. Thompson found himself surrounded by wealthy, connected witnesses who weren't going to let this disappear quietly. His institutional authority was meaningless against viral video and social media outrage. Dr. Naomi Brooks surveyed the scene she'd created simply by insisting on being treated with basic human dignity. The crew that had humiliated her was suspended and facing career extinction. The airport manager who'd supported them was scrambling to save his own job. The witnesses who'd remained silent initially were now active allies demanding justice. But she still wasn't done. She had one more phone call to make. Dr. Naomi Brooks reached into her medical bag one final time, retrieving a second phone, a sleek device that looked different from her personal iPhone. This was her business phone, connected to networks and contacts that could reshape entire industries. Before I make this call, she announced, her voice carrying across the tarmac to the assembled group of crew members, witnesses, and airport officials. I want everyone to understand exactly what's about to happen. The wind had died down, leaving the December air sharp and still. Carlos Mendez adjusted his phone angle, ensuring his 9,000 live stream viewers could capture every word. Comments flooded past faster than anyone could read, but the sentiment was universal anticipation. Madison Torres felt her stomach drop. She'd thought the worst was over when they discovered Naomi actually owned the aircraft. She was beginning to realize the worst hadn't even started. Michael Davis suspended you from Platinum Air Services. Naomi continued, looking directly at each crew member. That's one company. But private aviation is a small industry. Word travels fast. Reputations matter. Captain Kane's face was gray. In 30 years of flying, he'd built a reputation for professionalism and reliability. That reputation was his most valuable asset, more important than his pilot's license, more crucial than his accumulated flight hours. Tyler Morgan was still frantically texting, but his contacts weren't responding. Word was already spreading through aviation networks faster than he could control. Jessica Rivera had backed almost to the terminal building, but she could still hear every word clearly. William Thompson was calculating damage control options, but Patricia Williams' threat about media contacts had eliminated most of his strategies. This phone, Naomi said, holding up the sleek device, is connected to the Aviation Safety and Professional Standards database. It's a private network used by aviation companies worldwide to share information about crew performance safety violations and professional misconduct. The ASPSD was legendary in aviation circles. Created by a consortium of major airlines and charter companies, it served as an industry-wide background check resource. A negative report in the ASPSD could end an aviation career permanently. Carlos Mendez translated for his Spanish-speaking viewers. Ella tiene acceso a una base de datos que puede terminar sus carreras para siempre. When I file a report with ASPSD about discrimination, harassment, and safety protocol violations, Naomi continued, it becomes part of each crew member's permanent record. Every airline, every charter company, every corporate flight department in the world will see it. Madison Torres started crying. Real tears, not the performative distress she'd shown earlier. Her dream of traveling the world as a flight attendant was evaporating in real time. But Naomi said, pausing dramatically, "That's not the call I'm making right now." Everyone froze. If not the aviation database, then what? Naomi scrolled through her contacts and selected a number. The phone rang once before connecting. "Senator Williams, it's Dr. Naomi Brooks." The name hit like a thunderbolt. Senator Patricia Williams was one of the most powerful politicians in America, chair of the Transportation Committee, and someone who could single-handedly reshape aviation regulations. "Senator, I'm calling about your daughter Emma." "Yes, she's recovering beautifully." "No, this is about something else entirely." Through the phone's speaker, Senator Williams's voice was clearly audible. "Dr. Brooks, anything you need. Emma wouldn't be alive without you. I'm currently at Teterboro Airport, where I've been denied boarding of my own private aircraft by crew members who made assumptions based on my race." The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds before Senator Williams exploded. "What are you telling me, that the woman who saved my daughter's life has been discriminated against at a federally regulated airport?" William Thompson looked like he might faint. Federal regulation meant federal oversight, federal investigations, federal consequences that could shut down airport operations. "Yes, Senator. Multiple crew members and an airport manager have refused to verify my credentials, made explicitly racist statements, and threatened me with arrest for trying to board my own aircraft. Dr. Brooks, are there witnesses, multiple witnesses, live video documentation, social media coverage? This incident has been broadcast to thousands of viewers in real time." Senator Williams's voice turned dangerous. "Dr. Brooks, I want names. I want incident reports. I want security footage. I'm convening emergency transportation committee hearings. This ends now." Carlos Mendez nearly dropped his phone. His live stream chat was exploding with viewers who couldn't believe they were witnessing a real-time civil rights incident that would reach the highest levels of government. The crew members are Madison Torres, flight attendant, Tyler Morgan, co-pilot, Captain Robert Kane, and Jessica Rivera, ground operations supervisor. The airport manager is William Thompson. Senator Williams was clearly writing down names. "Dr. Brooks, I'm immediately launching a federal investigation into discriminatory practices at Teterboro Airport. I'm also introducing emergency legislation requiring anti-bias training for all aviation personnel with access to federally regulated airports." Thompson was hyperventilating, Federal investigations could take years, cost millions, and destroy careers throughout the airport's management structure. Madison Torres collapsed onto a luggage cart, the full weight of her actions finally hitting her. She wasn't just losing a job. She was becoming the face of aviation discrimination in federal hearings that would be broadcast on C-SPAN. But Senator Williams wasn't finished. Dr. Brooks. I'm also calling the FAA Administrator, the Transportation Secretary, and the Attorney General. If this is happening to you, it's happening to other passengers. We're going to audit every private aviation facility in the country. Industry-wide audits. Every private airport, every charter company, every corporate flight department would face federal scrutiny because of what happened on this tarmac. Captain Kane understood he wasn't just losing his job. He was becoming a case study in federal discrimination training that would be mandatory for every aviation professional in America. Thank you, Senator. I'll have my legal team coordinate with your investigators. Dr. Brooks. I cannot apologize enough for what you've experienced. Emma and I will never forget what you did for our family, and we won't forget this either. As Naomi ended the call, the tarmac fell completely silent except for the distant hum of aircraft engines and Carlos Mendez whispering commentary to his live stream audience. Y'all, Carlos said quietly, this just became the biggest civil rights case in aviation history. This woman just turned a racist incident into federal legislation. Patricia Williams stepped forward, her business instincts recognizing the historical significance of what they'd just witnessed. Dr. Brooks, that was extraordinary. You've just changed the entire industry. Maria Santos was recording again, but now her content had shifted from luxury travel to documenting a watershed moment in civil rights history. James Parker understood better than most how rare it was to witness someone wielding power with such precision and devastating effect. His athlete clients would want to know about this, would want to understand how Dr. Brooks had transformed personal discrimination into industry-wide reform. David Kim was already drafting follow-up LinkedIn posts, knowing his professional network needed to understand the implications of what had just occurred. William Thompson made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the disaster. Dr. Brooks, perhaps we can discuss this internally before involving federal authorities. Dr. Naomi Brooks turned to face Thompson with the kind of look that had made medical students reconsider their career choices. Mr. Thompson, federal authorities are already involved. Senator Williams chairs the Transportation Committee. The investigation is already launched. The only question now is whether you'll cooperate fully or compound your problems by attempting to obstruct federal oversight. Thompson's shoulders sagged in defeat. Madison Torres was sobbing openly now, understanding that her name would be permanently associated with discrimination in aviation history. Tyler Morgan had stopped texting, realizing no connection could save him from federal scrutiny. Jessica Rivera was probably updating her resume, though it wouldn't matter with an ASPSD report in her file. Captain Kane stood silently watching 30 years of professional accomplishment disappear because he couldn't see past his own prejudices. But Dr. Naomi Brooks wasn't done demonstrating the power of consequences. She pulled out her personal phone and opened a group text that included the CEOs of the 5 largest private aviation companies in America. Final call, she announced to the assembled group. Industry notification. Her fingers moved rapidly across the screen. Discrimination incident at Teterboro involving Platinum Air Services crew. Federal investigation launched, requesting industry-wide policy review. Video documentation available. Within seconds, replies started arriving. CEO responses committing to immediate policy reviews, promising cooperation with federal investigations, announcing enhanced anti-discrimination training. The private aviation industry was restructuring itself in real time to avoid becoming collateral damage in the federal response to this incident. Carlos Mendez captured every moment. Hermanos, this woman just forced an entire industry to change its policies with one text message. She didn't just get justice for herself, she got justice for everyone who comes after her. As the implications sank in, the assembled group understood they'd witnessed something unprecedented. Not just the exposure of discrimination, but the complete dismantling of the structures that enabled it. Dr. Naomi Brooks had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a comprehensive victory for civil rights in aviation. And she still had to catch her flight to Aspen. The next hour unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice, each movement more devastating than the last for those who had underestimated Dr. Naomi Brooks. Within minutes of Senator Williams' call, 3 black SUVs arrived at Teterboro Airport. Federal investigators, aviation safety officials, and civil rights attorneys emerged with briefcases and recording equipment. The private airport that catered to the ultra-wealthy suddenly looked like a crime scene. Carlos Mendez had to adjust his live stream setup as investigators politely asked him to continue recording, but from a position that wouldn't interfere with their work. His viewer count had peaked at 12,000, with clips of his stream being shared across every social media platform imaginable. Mira Gente Carlos whispered to his audience, "This is what justice looks like when you mess with the wrong person." Federal investigators just rolled up like it's a movie. Madison Torres sat on the luggage cart where she'd collapsed, staring at her phone in horror as notifications flooded her screen. Her Instagram account. Madison Flies High was being overwhelmed with comments ranging from angry to devastating. Screenshots of her discriminatory behavior were being shared faster than she could process. Her follower count was dropping in real time. 47,000 became 45,000, then 42,000, then 38,000. Brands that had sent her free products were publicly distancing themselves. The luxury lifestyle she'd built through social media was crumbling as fast as her aviation career. Tyler Morgan was discovering that the aviation world was smaller than he'd imagined. His father's connections in corporate aviation weren't returning calls. Word had spread through professional networks with the speed of wildfire. The ASPSD report that Dr. Brooks had threatened was already being prepared, but it was becoming irrelevant. Nobody needed an official database to know what Tyler Morgan had done. It was documented in high-definition video watched by tens of thousands of people. Captain Kane faced the most devastating professional consequences. The airline transport pilot license he'd worked 30 years to earn was under review by the FAA. His decades of experience, his spotless safety record, his thousands of flight hours, none of it mattered now. He'd let prejudice override professionalism, and the aviation industry was unforgiving of pilots who demonstrated poor judgment. Jessica Rivera had disappeared into the terminal building, but her absence wouldn't save her. Airport security cameras had captured her every discriminatory statement. Her supervisory position required exemplary professional conduct, and she'd failed spectacularly on the most public stage possible. William Thompson was in his office on a conference call with airport board members, lawyers, and crisis management consultants. Through his window, he could see federal investigators setting up equipment on the tarmac. His 20-year tenure as airport operations manager was almost certainly over, but his immediate concern was preventing the airport from losing its federal operating certificate. Dr. Naomi Brooks stood calmly in the center of the chaos she'd created, checking her watch with the patience of someone who'd fought similar battles her entire career. She'd learned long ago that institutional change required institutional pressure, and she'd just applied leverage that would reshape an entire industry. Patricia Williams had called her contacts at CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. All 3 networks were dispatching crews to Teterboro for live coverage. What had started as a private discrimination incident was becoming national news. Maria Santos was coordinating with other influencers who'd picked up her initial coverage. Teterboro discrimination was trending globally, with aviation professionals from around the world sharing their own stories of bias and discrimination in the industry. David Kim was fielding interview requests from business journalists who recognized the broader implications of the incident. His LinkedIn post had been shared over 2,000 times, reaching executives throughout the travel and transportation industries. James Parker was on the phone with his most high-profile clients, athletes who faced discrimination constantly and appreciated seeing someone fight back effectively. Several had already committed to signal-boosting the story to their combined audience of millions. The new flight crew that Michael Davis had promised was arriving by helicopter, landing directly on the tarmac with the precision of a military operation. Captain Maria Gonzalez and First Officer James Johnson emerged with calm professionalism, followed by Flight Attendant Elena Rodriguez. All three crew members were people of color. The image wasn't lost on anyone present. Platinum Air Services was making a statement about diversity and inclusion that would be visible in every news report about the incident. Captain Gonzalez approached Dr. Brooks with respectful authority. "Dr. Brooks, I'm Captain Maria Gonzalez. We're here to ensure you have a safe and comfortable flight to Aspen. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate you getting here so quickly. Ma'am, it's an honor to serve you. We've reviewed the flight plan. Weather conditions are excellent, and we're ready for departure at your convenience." The contrast was stark and deliberate. Professional respect replacing racist dismissal. Competent service replacing discriminatory assumptions. Human dignity replacing prejudicial treatment. Carlos Mendez captured the crew change for his livestream audience. "Look at this, hermanos. This is how you're supposed to treat passengers. With respect, regardless of what they look like." As Dr. Brooks finally climbed the stairs to her own aircraft, Madison Torres made one final desperate attempt at damage control. She approached the stairs, tears streaming down her face. "Dr. Brooks, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean any harm. I was just doing my job. Please don't let them destroy my life." Dr. Brooks paused on the stairs and looked down at Madison with the same clinical assessment she might give a patient's symptoms. "Ms. Torres," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the tarmac, "you weren't doing your job. Your job was to verify passenger credentials and provide professional service. Instead, you made racist assumptions and treated me with contempt. The consequences you're facing aren't punishment, they're accountability." Madison collapsed to her knees on the tarmac, the full weight of her actions finally overwhelming her. She'd thought racism was consequence-free as long as it was polite and professional-sounding. She was learning otherwise. Tyler Morgan tried to approach as well, but Captain Gonzalez intercepted him. "Sir, please step away from the aircraft." The authority in her voice was unmistakable. Tyler found himself facing a Latina captain who commanded more respect in 30 seconds than he'd earned in 6 months of flying. As Dr. Brooks disappeared into the cabin of her aircraft, the federal investigators began their interviews. Carlos Mendez was invited to provide his live stream footage as evidence. Patricia Williams shared her video recordings. Maria Santos provided her social media documentation. David Kim offered his professional network connections for broader investigation. The evidence was overwhelming, documented from multiple angles, witnessed by credible sources, and broadcast live to thousands of viewers. There would be no disputing what had happened, no alternate narratives, no plausible deniability. Michael Davis arrived by private car, his face pale with stress. As CEO of Platinum Air Services, he faced potential federal sanctions, industry boycotts, and catastrophic reputation damage. His company's stock price was already dropping based on preliminary social media reports. He immediately fired Madison Torres, Tyler Morgan, and Captain Kane on the spot with termination letters citing discrimination, violation of company policy, and bringing disrepute to the organization. Their aviation careers were over before the federal investigation had even officially begun. The engines of Dr. Brooks's Bombardier Global 7500 began their startup sequence, the distinctive whine cutting through the December air. Inside the cabin, she was finally receiving the service she'd paid for: professional, respectful, competent. Captain Gonzalez's voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Brooks, we're cleared for departure. Flight time to Aspen will be approximately 2 hours. Thank you for flying with us today." As the aircraft began to taxi toward the runway, Carlos Mendez provided final commentary for his live stream audience. "Y'all just watched history happen. This woman faced down an entire structure of discrimination and changed it in real time. She didn't just get justice for herself, she got justice for everyone who comes after her." The Bombardier lifted off from Teterboro at 5:47 p.m., climbing into the December sky with Dr. Naomi Brooks finally in her rightful seat. Below the airport buzzed with federal investigators, news crews, and the wreckage of several aviation careers. The discrimination that had seemed so casual and consequence-free an hour earlier had triggered a federal investigation, industry-wide policy changes, and national media coverage that would reshape private aviation forever. Dr. Brooks had won more than access to her own aircraft. She'd won comprehensive change that would protect countless future passengers from experiencing what she'd endured. And she'd done it all with the quiet dignity and devastating precision that had made her one of the world's most respected neurosurgeons. The flight to Aspen would be smooth, professional, and respectful, exactly what she'd paid for, and exactly what every passenger deserved. 6 months later, the private aviation industry had been fundamentally transformed by what became known as the Teterboro incident. Dr. Naomi Brooks hadn't just won a personal victory. She'd catalyzed the most comprehensive civil rights reform in aviation history. The Air Equity app launched on a Tuesday morning in June with backing from Dr. Brooks's NeuroCure Inc. and support from Senator Williams' Transportation Committee. Within 24 hours, it had been downloaded 2.3 million times. The platform allowed passengers to rate flight crews in real time, report discrimination incidents with video evidence, and access a database of aviation professionals' service records. Airlines and charter companies initially resisted the transparency, but customer demand and federal pressure made adoption inevitable. Within 3 months, every major aviation company had integrated Air Equity ratings into their hiring and performance evaluation processes. Carlos Mendez, whose live stream had documented the original incident, was hired as Air Equity's Director of Community Engagement. His bilingual social media expertise and authentic voice had made him the face of aviation accountability. His TikTok account, Carlos Truth, Tells now had 2.8 million followers who appreciated his continued coverage of industry developments. "Remember mi gente," Carlos said in a recent video filmed at Miami International Airport. "Respect isn't optional. It's required. And now, there's an app to prove it." Madison Torres had moved back to Ohio and was working at a shopping mall. But unlike vindictive portrayals in typical stories, Dr. Brooks had insisted on a more balanced resolution. Through Air Equity's rehabilitation program, Madison was enrolled in diversity and inclusion training, working toward eventually returning to aviation with better understanding and changed behavior. The program, funded by Dr. Brooks, personally offered a path to redemption for aviation professionals who acknowledged their mistakes and committed to comprehensive education. It was justice tempered with mercy accountability, balanced with the possibility of growth. Tyler Morgan had left aviation entirely and was working in his family's small construction business in Colorado. The federal investigation had found no evidence of deliberate discrimination beyond the Teterboro incident, allowing him to avoid criminal charges while ending his flying career. Captain Kane had lost his ATP license but was working as a ground school instructor teaching new pilots about the importance of professional conduct and bias awareness. His 30 years of experience hadn't been entirely wasted. It was being redirected toward education and prevention. Jessica Rivera had been demoted and transferred to a different airport where she worked under strict supervision while completing extensive bias training. Her supervisory privileges had been permanently revoked, but she remained employed in a position where she could cause less harm. William Thompson had been terminated as airport operations manager, but found work consulting with smaller airports on compliance and diversity issues. His experience with federal investigations, while personally devastating, had given him unique expertise in helping other facilities avoid similar problems. Platinum Air Services had survived the crisis, but underwent complete restructuring. Michael Davis implemented the most comprehensive diversity and inclusion program in private aviation, with monthly bias training, diverse hiring requirements, and passenger advocacy protocols. The company's stock price had recovered, but its corporate culture was permanently changed. Teterboro Airport itself had become a model for inclusivity in aviation. The Dignity is Non-Negotiable plaque in the FBO lobby reminded every visitor that respect was fundamental to service. New passenger rights protections were posted throughout the terminal, and cultural sensitivity training was mandatory for all personnel. The federal legislation that emerged from the incident, known as the Private Aviation Equality Act, required annual bias training for all aviation personnel with access to federally regulated airports. The law also established the Federal Aviation Discrimination Response Office, with Dr. Brooks serving as an unpaid advisor. Senator Williams had kept her promise about comprehensive industry audits. Over 200 private aviation facilities faced federal review, resulting in policy changes at 89% of inspected locations. The message was clear. Discrimination would trigger federal oversight that no facility could afford to ignore. But the most meaningful change came in the daily experiences of passengers who had previously faced bias and dismissal. Social media filled with stories of improved treatment, respectful service, and professional conduct from aviation personnel who understood they were being watched and evaluated. Dr. Brooks had created more than an app or a law. She'd created cultural accountability that made discrimination professionally toxic. Aviation workers knew that discriminatory behavior would be documented, reported, and career-ending. The transformation extended beyond aviation. Other luxury service industries began adopting similar rating programs and bias training efforts. Hotels, restaurants, and retail establishments recognized that customer discrimination was no longer sustainable in an age of viral accountability. On a warm December morning, exactly 1 year after the original incident, Dr. Naomi Brooks returned to Teterboro Airport for the first time since her discriminatory treatment. The contrast was remarkable. Captain Elena Rodriguez greeted her personally at the FBO entrance. "Dr. Brooks, welcome back to Teterboro. Your aircraft is prepared and ready for departure." The crew for her Bombardier Global 7500 included Captain James Washington, co-pilot Sarah Kim, and flight attendant Maria Santos. The same Maria Santos who had witnessed the original incident and become an advocate for change. Dr. Brooks Maria said warmly, "It's an honor to serve you today. I've completed advanced cultural competency training since we last met, and I wanted to thank you for inspiring industry-wide changes that benefit all passengers." As Dr. Brooks climbed the stairs to her aircraft, she paused to look across the tarmac where the original confrontation had occurred. Carlos Mendez was there with a film crew documenting the anniversary return for a special Air Equity documentary. 1 year ago, he said into his camera, "We witnessed discrimination become accountability. Today, we see how one woman's dignity changed an entire industry." Inside the aircraft, the service was exemplary, not because Dr. Brooks was special, but because respectful treatment had become the industry standard. Her refusal to accept less had raised the bar for everyone. As the Bombardier taxied toward the runway, Dr. Brooks reflected on the year that had passed. She'd achieved more than personal justice. She'd created structural change that would protect countless future passengers from experiencing discriminatory treatment. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing into clear skies above New York. Below Teterboro Airport continued its operations with new respect for dignity, new awareness of bias, and new commitment to treating every passenger with professional courtesy, regardless of their appearance. Captain Washington's voice came through the cabin speakers. "Dr. Brooks, we're cleared to altitude. Thank you for flying with us today, and thank you for everything you've done for our industry." Dr. Brooks smiled as she settled into her seat with a glass of wine and a medical journal. She had a cabin in Aspen waiting a pharmaceutical empire to run and lives to save in operating rooms around the world. But first, she had transformed an industry that had tried to diminish her, creating lasting change through the simple act of refusing to accept disrespect. The dignity she'd insisted upon for herself had become a standard that protected everyone who came after her. Sometimes revolution started with one person refusing to move from where they belonged, and Dr. Naomi Brooks had always belonged in first class, not because of her wealth, but because of her humanity. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that quiet strength can change the world. Don't forget to hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of how they look. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove dignity always wins in the end. And drop a comment below telling us about a time you stood up for what's right. Your story might inspire our next video. Remember, when we speak up against injustice, we don't just change our own lives. We change the world for everyone who comes after us. Justice always finds a way to take flight.